In this episode 5, I actually wanted to talk about the problem of emotion when it comes to judging other people or when it comes to judging speech. For example, my position is that one of the many reasons that this podcast isn't quite as successful as it could be, and I'm pretty sure eventually will be, is that, if words are spoken that are not just arbitrary whimsical stuff or something like talking about stationeers where everybody who is listening is basically on board, but are instead words that have the potential to move something, then those who would be moved by them will feel to be basically pushed. This will implicitly feel negative, and so, the messenger is then being blamed. Or let's just say these words, we don't like them, not necessarily the messenger, because we don't want to hear them, and we don't want to reflect on that anyway. Damn, now I am at that topic. But no, I wanted instead spontaneously to just talk for a short moment about this recent space flight of this all-female crew that was done. And I just heard about that this morning, so I'm basically completely uninformed. But that's not a problem. Why? Because what I'm going to talk about is not the spaceflight, but about concepts that are related to it. You know, I like to talk about high-level concepts because they are so all-containing. Also, they can be thought through logically, and so if anyone disagrees, I can just say they're wrong, and that's fun. What's this? Alright, I'm currently alt-tapped somewhere else. So let's talk for a second about Superman. Why that? Because, I mean, Superman, this comic book character, or just, the conceptual Superman, could save people from falling from high ledges. So they could save them from accidents, get them out of car crashes. There's an earthquake. He could help the people who have been buried by that. And maybe that would be a super boring comic, and so that's not why it's being done. But ultimately, imagine you were in that actual situation. You were Superman, or Superman was actually a part of our world. Would you not constantly have to accuse him for not constantly basically saving people and preventing or diminishing, reducing suffering at all costs with the highest potential power, 24/7 if he doesn't need sleep? And if he doesn't do that, then he's Hitler, basically, Isn't that kind of something that would, it would certainly happen, of course. There are 8 billion people, and too many of those have access to the internet in a way that they use it for not for good purposes, but to just wallow in filth. The filth of their own impurities. And if you see what Jesus said when, supposedly, when he sat there and was drawing in the sand while the people were about to stone someone, and then they said, for whatever reason, hey Jesus, are we supposed to stone this person, yes or no? When he then said, eventually, those of you without flaw, toss the first stone. With which he was saying, one thing that he was saying is, effectively, if you are without guilt, then you're worthy to judge her and to kill her with your stone. He was also saying, but none of you are, so maybe you want to, look at your own front door, right? Instead of going here and killing someone because somehow the mob came together and is celebrating this, killing someone. Oh, it's fun for you. You actually celebrating that she's guilty because you just want to kill her. There's also something you can probably accuse some societies of who like to play with cranes and such. Oh, that was a radioactive statement, huh? Anyway, but he was also saying that if you would be innocent, how would you have become innocent? You would possibly be, you would basically be a holy person. Who is actually innocent while they're still an adult? So you have made so many decisions. How can you possibly be innocent? And someone on that level would possibly, plain simply, judge differently, would be more forgiving, or would maybe decide the woman is not actually guilty of what she has been accused of, and so forth. So we're saying a lot of things at once, and I'm not saying, hey, Jesus is awesome, you should listen to him, not at all. Jesus has said and done a lot of stupid things. There's a long list of that, and if you don't know that, I'm not going to look that up for you. Why should I? I mean, cursing a fig tree for not being currently, when it was out of season, having fruits because he wanted to eat from it, that's ridiculous, man. But there were also other things. And saying that all the old laws still hold true until not everything is done. With everything is done, he probably actually meant the apocalypse, basically the completion of the world, implying that also slavery is right, for the Bible gives specific instructions as to how to have slaves. That is not a good book, man. But there are certainly parts. It's the big book of multiple choice, and that's a good thing, because we could think of it like a box with Lego parts. If you have a box full of Lego parts, you have small ones, the 2-bit piece, the 2-knob bit and the 4-knob bit or 3 knobs, and then you have the plates, and you have bigger parts. All of that in a box. And if you shake that box, what will happen is that the smallest parts will drift to the bottom, and the big parts that will stay on the top, and so forth. The process of shaking is basically random influx, like, I don't know, when you smoke THC or something, which I'm not hereby proposing, I'm just hypothesizing, and me, maybe that I like to do such things, that I like to talk about high-level concepts, and because they possibly contain so much wisdom and advice and insight, and they are just fun to think about, and so forth. So then you're just introducing noise into yourself, randomness, just like the random mutation of evolution does. And the reason that we're not always dying of cancer each and every time is that the genetic system that we are is already that stable that it can protect itself from random mutation to be too bad. It doesn't mean that we're actually safe, but it has changed the probability in this regard. In the same way, when you're introducing randomness into your thinking by shaking it with, smoking something, or by reading a rather random book like the Bible, where you can go in any which way, in that way, then you're basically you're using the lens of randomness to look at your own brain and to shake things around, to sort them a bit. And that's, again, an interesting thing. So, here's already a value for this little podcast episode. I mean, if there's something you haven't thought yet, or implemented yet, and so forth, there's some insight, there's some wisdom. It's there, it's real. Keep listening. Not sure if the rest of this episode will be good, because it was a spontaneous thing, like I said. So, big book of multiple choice, Judgement, Superman. Now, some people are saying that the space flight there for, I don't know, half an hour, a few minutes, I don't know how long it was, in low orbit, not actually orbiting, but being kind of in quasi-zero gravity, only low gravity, with Katy Perry and some other prominent figures, one of them at least, even kind of astronautish, because I mean, my statement at this point would have been, well, you should have sent, well, if you're sending artists and such, you should have sent Tasman Archer, the Sleeping Satellite song is actually about space travel. And when we went to the moon too soon, in the wrong time, when the world wasn't yet ready to continue to pick up on that and so forth. Maybe I want to just check that out. It's a good song, by the way. Not that I like the video, but okay. Anyway, some people are saying that this space flight was a bad thing. It was a waste of resources. They could rather have used those, I don't know how much went in there, millions at least, definitely. Spaceflight is super expensive, or billions even, that they could have used it for other purposes. Which is true, but is it a true assessment? Is it a correct judgment in this case? Is it? I mean, here's the thing. Let's say, let's just think about a hypothetical world. Just hypothetical. A world where there is billions of people, kind of like in ours. And in that world, though, there is a large portion, let's say 10%, 20%, who are poor, who don't have anything to eat. You see me saying something that is actually true there, right? That's the world we live in. and you have actually a conduit to those people with via charities and so forth. And of course, one has to be wary because some charities they take a little bit too much cream off the top if what they do even is being done at all. See, for example, USAID and whatever, which is not a charity. I know AID is not supposed to mean aid. It's was something else. Well, maybe I'm talking gibberish right now. Okay, doesn't matter. You have that conduit. You can just say, okay, I have money here. I give that now into this little thing here. I can even automate that every month. And then these people will have very slightly less suffering. And this will not make a big difference, but at least I am doing my part. And then you could say, well, this is like littering, basically. If you want a world that is free of littering, then the only way to really get there is that everybody stops littering. That's the only way to do it. And so even if your action doesn't actually solve the problem, and when you're doing that, you're seeing then other people not doing it, well, in the case of littering, you see them still litter, it's kind of painful, like, even though that is the case, it's the only way to get there, and therefore for you, it's the right way to do, the right thing to do. So if everybody eventually then stops littering, that's the only way. Then we will have a world free of littering, free of garbage being tossed, cigarette butts and so forth. Personally, I believe in karma, and I don't know really what the people who are guiding one child on one hand and the cigarette in the other hand, so the child is definitely exposed to that smoke, and then tossing the cigarette butt on the ground. I don't know what expectation they have in regards to what the universe will do to them. But I hope they have actually read the inscription on these, on the packaging, that it is not good for your health, right? Anyway, so I have now said with too many words that basically, if you have a pet, a dog, cat, whatever, which costs you money, you could use that money to give that to charity. Am I saying that you should? No. That is the topic. The topic is not the charity thing. The topic is indeed the question, should you? Like I said in the beginning, when I was talking about Superman. So if he can help, does he have to? So in the case of the space flight, we can say it's a very central thing. It's very loud. Everybody is seeing it, and the people who made it happen could, let's say that's indeed a case where you could have said, if you invest this money here, instead of giving it to charity, that's $1 billion or so that's missing then effectively from charity, and that is one central decision where you could have made a difference, and so that's easier. You could say, well, this is my dog. What difference does it make if I give the money to charity? It doesn't make much of a difference. Also, this is my life, blah, blah. But this thing with what they're doing there with the space flight, that is one huge thing that was really not necessary. Just one momentary moment. It's not like my dog is just there one day of the week. It's just, it lives here. So I have to keep it alive. If I just give to charity instead of feeding it for like a week, this means that it will die for the rest of its life. But however, this thing there with the space flight, that was one momentary thing that they could have just not done. And all of these arguments are good. But we could also counter-argue that the space flight thing, where everybody can say, well, that was unnecessary, or was it? I'm not judging, Though, one thing at this point I can say definitely is some celebrations like, it was all female, yeah, that was made it special, whatever. That's bullshit. Because, if someone with enough money who has no problem wasting it, and I think it was, wasn't it an Amazon thing? I don't know. Certainly, I think the fiance of Jeff Bezos was on board. But I'm not sure. But anyway, okay, the money being tossed in, if that's coming from a place where it's not hard to get money from because there just is so much, then doing that in a way that it is an orchestrated event that is only all female, then how is it special that it is all female? If it is just designed to be, it's like, okay, someone made a film, there's only females in that film. And okay, a film has to be successful, but at some point, first it just exists. And then to say, well, this film that exists is all female, that makes it special. Does it? Someone decided that, someone orchestrated that. I mean, it's not like they had to... Okay, I don't know enough of that about that space flight, but I don't think that the passengers on board were actually responsible for making sure that the ship flies properly. But okay, that's all beside the point, and I don't want to criticize this. It's just one point of contention to say it's all female. Is that special? Someone thought it is special if it's all female, so they orchestrated it to in consequence of that being all female, and Shazam, it's all female. Does it make that special then? I think it doesn't. In this regard, at least. Could we stop with that whole sex and gender thing, please? You know, it's the first black female president. Does it make that the right choice? Don't we have to look at other aspects there? Okay, but back on topic. So, it is a very prominent example of... Wait, what's with the music? Is a prominent example of something that could as well not have been done without much of a difference, other than the fact that all of that money would not have been gone into that, which did not give us new, I don't know, science or whatever. So it seems like it's... Where's my take? Was ultimately superfluous. So that money was then wasted. It could have gone to charity. But isn't that... And again, I'm not judging. But is that then not merely an example? You know, to go against that argument that pet owners would now have to say, well, this is one central thing that was definitely superfluous and so forth. Is that not just a public example that can serve to teach of the very concept of wasting resources that could be used rather for other purposes? And that's interesting. I mean, if someone would, for example, try to be like a holy person or as innocent as possible, doesn't this mean they would have to give everything that they have away? And I disagree. I don't know why exactly I do, but I disagree with that. So I think the decision, the question of what a right or wrong decision is not that simple. I don't know why exactly. I mean, I don't want to say... I mean, we can certainly say some people are more valuable than others. But, yes, but, I mean, for example, there's the death penalty. And I kind of disagree with it, and I kind of agree. Because some people fucking deserve it. But I disagree in that I think that humans might not be capable enough to make a decision of that absolute level with a high enough level of certainty to risk making the wrong decision there. Then on the other hand, many people who are being sent to death when it comes to death penalty are ones who are actually guilty of doing that themselves, of basically whimsically, or when they did a robbery or whatever, of taking someone else's life. So maybe it's just balancing that out. Not karma-wise, but I mean, the one thing is in the world, why should the thing that reacts to it, which is the justice system in the world, why should that then be expected to be holy? As in, I mean, maybe the only way to really make sure that a decision you make is innocent is to not make any decision. However, how would you ever arrive at such an insight, if it would be a true insight? By the life that you have lived. So, doesn't this potentially mean that the life that you have lived, at least some aspects, are now things that you deserve if you now choose to live kind of a holy life, that you don't interfere with reality in any negative way, but you have arrived there with the life that you have, and so now you have arrived on that level, the right to keep all those things. Because they are part of your identity, that very identity that made you choose to be an innocent person. Whatever innocence there really means. So I'm saying it's very hard to decide what is the right decision. Is it, I mean, does every human have the same value? That is, of course, almost, I don't know, not fascist, but, you know, very evil, potentially evil thing to say. But the problem here rather is not that I am saying that it is maybe so, because I'm saying it's definitely so. Definitely humans have different values. I mean, let's say there's someone who has been born, grew up, was kind of innocent, a child, but since we have free will, I truly believe we do, we can make decisions that we can basically choose evil. We can choose to be entertained by making others suffer. And what if that person then becomes just pure pain upon the world, really absolute total evil, does that person have the same value as someone who is as innocent as they can be and even fights such a phenomenon, fights against people who are like that? Do these people have the same right to exist on this world? Definitely not. I mean, I think that if someone would say they have the same right to exist, they are just children. I mean, someone who makes such an assessment is just a child. Maybe some political correct thing to say, which is not kind of my cup of tea. I'd rather say something that is true within the limits that I can say things, because certainly I would go further with my speech if I wouldn't rather have to be wary that some things just cannot yet be said, and so I don't say them. But see, the key problem there is not so much that whether people have different rights to a right to live, which I firmly hold. I firmly hold true that people have varying degrees of rights to live on this planet. And I think I have given a sufficiently strong example where you would have to say, yeah, okay, well, if you're going that far in that example, I would agree that person has at least slightly a lower or higher right to live. The real problem, though, which I have been trying to get to for a few minutes now, the real problem is, of course, how would you assess that? How would you decide that? And might even be that if you make a decision on that level, which is a very, very high level. So I've also made a decision on a very, very high level, right? No, I have not. I've only talked about something that is probably true without it affecting reality in a negative or positive way. Or in any way. I mean, is talking truth, is thinking truth and thinking truth out loud somehow a thing that needs to be called into question? It shouldn't be. I know that's slightly so. I mean, I already said that some things I would say I cannot say, or rather am wary not to say, because we're not yet living in that world where truth is the unconditionally highest value, no matter if anyone is offended. But yeah, in principle, I think you agree that as long as it's just basically individual, or in this case, kind of public truth processing, then it's fine. It's okay. Yeah. As long as you're not going and saying, well, and therefore this particular person, here's the name, here's the address, has less of a right to live, and therefore we should all do something about it. No, that's not what I'm doing, obviously. And that would be, if someone would do that, they would risk to affect reality in a way that is so negative that they themselves lower their right, their score. I think that maybe humans can ultimately be summed up, not by humans, we cannot do it. See, again, we are not equipped to do that, to really be sure that our decision is sufficient to cast someone into non-existence. But that humans can ultimately be summed up in one number, just a simple floating point number, a simple decimal number. The entirety of the value of a human can, in my opinion, be summed up in one number. And that number, if it is negative, means, well, be gone. And if the number is 0, or positive, but even if it is 0, then it means the person has the full right to live. So just either be gone, or you have all the right to be here. Doesn't mean that people who have a higher score don't have a higher right to be here. How would that manifest in the practice? I mean, if I'm already invoking such a concept, well, we're already doing it, man. People who we deem to have a greater value, they have more of a say as to the shape of reality, and thus they are occupying the potential probability space that others could paint over. I mean, we are living all in this book, right, that we're all co-authoring, this book of the universe and this book of reality. Or we could say we are all living on this canvas that we can also paint over with our brushes. And I think the people who are objectively best equipped to define the painting that we shall experience are the ones who should have the biggest brush. And I think we kind of all agree, because that's kind of how our system is structured. The people we elect into power, hypothetically, too bad, not in practice, they are the people who we deem to have, who are best equipped to do that. So back to this thing with charity and so forth, the right to live. The moment you decide, well, I would rather give the money to my dog than to charity, implicitly you're kind of deciding your dog is more important than, or cat, whatever, is more important than that person you would give the money to. Isn't that so? But is that really how a person can think? Is that really a reasonable way to deal with all of that? Also, who is to judge? Is there something like a cosmic judge? I believe there is, but not in the form that there is a god beyond the walls of the universe looking into it and thinking, that's not nice, but for some reason I don't interfere even though I could, and later I will burn them forever, which is a ridiculous fucking thought. And I mean, to those who fear hell, you have to realize the following. See, we have to abstract. What is the idea of hell? It is the description of something, of a potential thing that could happen, that is on the list of things that anyone would not want to happen, highest. That's the underlying concept. So you think of that concept, not of hell, you think of that concept. What is something that people would definitely not want? And then you make it concrete. So what would that be? Oh, for example, to have an eternal perception situation where you cannot but perceive, which you're doing, you're perceiving with your body, but that perception would be eternal, and your perception would be unfree, your life would be unfree. And not only that, but you would also be, basically your soul would be molten pain for eternity. And so, since that is such a simple thing to really come up with, to wrestle someone else's mental capacity to process information and then to let will emerge based upon whatever they have thought into obedience so that they submit to your stupid religious memeplex, since that is such a simple thing to come up with, we can also realize it is irrelevant. Because how many times has that idea been had? I mean, it's so simple, that idea, that it was probably come up with many times. And if it's such a simple idea, then how relevant can it be? How true can it be if it's probably just made up? I mean, the more probable it is that someone comes up with an idea, the more probable it is that, if we cannot be sure that the idea is made up, that it is actually a made up idea. Crap, how do I cut this here? Oh, like this, right. But I mean, how was I now getting to this judge behind the scenes or whatever? Or rather, what is my perspective there? I believe that we're living in the karma space, and God exists really, yes. And you know who God is? It's you. and that's not a metaphor. I mean, really, the Holy One, the Eternal One, having chosen to change his or her, whatever, eternal existence into this universe machine, which is of course still him in quotation marks, in a configuration that will ultimately produce infinite bliss. That he would just sit on his ass without having to do anything, and instead of having to be waking up between dreams of existence to the pure neutrality between universes, or between existences, so to speak, between forms of existence, which the last moment of which being the best possible experience, you know, waking up again to I am and to infinity and so forth. Instead of that, I mean, the last steps of that then being an abstraction step, since abstracting is something he does, you know, it's liquid intelligence, of course. It abstracts itself, and so it can ultimately abstract infinity. And so the last step is then kind of a fade over, and then basically the infinite holy orgasm is gone. Then it is just then it says, oh, I exist, I'm holy, I have all potential, can do anything I want, so what shall we do next? Kind of like that, except that moment would not be a thought process. But okay, all of that is irrelevant. The last step, just, you know, basically the universe, this purpose being a way to unify the dream and the wake state in a way that allows for an eternal waking up, so that we get closer and closer to this I am moment without ever in eternity reaching it. And I believe the closer the universe has, I mean, it's basically one goes into a deep dream, like into an aquarium, as deeply as possible, and then after having dived through below some kind of conceptual wall at the very bottom of the ocean of dreams, to the other side, where the fact that he can dream as many dreams as he wants, but between them is always non-existence, instead turning that into the everything at once configuration, where all the dreams coexist at the same time, then we know that is leaving I am behind and then slowly waking up to we are. And I believe what we're doing is slowly waking up to we are. I mean, the golden rule implies it. The golden rule, one of the best ways to find coexistence is let's not hurt anyone's will or emotion, if at all possible, reasonably, in a balance with everything else. And this requires a lot of concrete knowledge. I mean, we have to abstract. We have to deal. We have to deal with. How do I say this? Let's say it's a very abstract rule, and to implement it, we have our laws. That's basically what laws are. They are an attempt to make this very complex situation one that is graspable, make it concrete, to say if this, then that, to make it into a program, so to speak. And well, this this attempt of ours to get closer and closer to the perfectly flat ocean, where everything is calmed down and we will all coexist perfectly, and certainly we're doing that better than we have done thousands of years ago. You might think that it's not the case, but it is the case. I mean, a long time ago, what constitutes good coexistence was just measured by very rough, simple parameters, like don't kill me, don't take my possessions, stuff like that. But these days, we're even considering each other's most flimsy of emotions is an attempt, at least we're trying to do. We're trying to get there. So that is basically mankind trying to wake up to we are, to the true meaning of we coexist, and trying to wake up, trying to find out basically what does consciousness mean. I mean, before the universe, God wakes up to I am, and so he finds out what existence means, what holy means, what I am means, what perception means, what consciousness means, and then he shatters himself once again into a gazillion pieces puzzle to reassemble himself because it's fucking fun. Well, in the universe now, we have this coexistence waking up. We're trying to wake up collectively to what does it mean to coexist. And the universe, I think, is merely just an artifact of that. It's a consequence of when there's not just one mind, but multiple. It's the necessary form that would happen. Not saying the universe, to its very last detail, would have to have the current form that it has, because since I believe that free will is actually a part of this whole thing, yes, even as part of the process of the universe itself becoming, well, of course it could have been differently. And that's, I think, what we observe in the quantum realm, when we have overlapping when two atoms, for example, can be in the same quantum state, which means then truly, and I will not elaborate on that again this time, have a truly undefined state. The state that they have is not just one that we don't know. It is truly undefined. There's a cryptographic implementation of that, and there wouldn't be if that would if that would be the case. Anyway. And there's also the quantum uncertainty when it comes to measurement, position, and speed. We can not measure the speed to arbitrary precision. If we want to also measure the position to arbitrary precision, we can only decide for one of the two. Or we can, of course, crossfade between the two of them. But, and that is true uncertainty. That means, in my very strong opinion, that the closer we get down there in the universe to the smallest scales, what happens is, well, the universe itself might be infinite, but it isn't. Down there, it ends. In the smallest scales, the universe ends. The system, this nuclear dance that we have here, it has basically run its course of necessity. The wave washes up the beach, and then it has run out of necessity power and then falls back. Further high, it will just stay dry. Further high, the possibility will stay pure. Further high, the consciousness, the will stay undefined and can keep driving this thing with its cosmic emotion. Maybe at this point I should mention again, and that's a very good concept to think about, that if the universe, in its emergence, whether it's a creation or not, was ever at some point pre-spatial, as in it didn't have space, then does this mean that right now that aspect is gone? I mean, we have planets which consist of atoms. We have atoms that consist of molecules. Even though we have atoms, we still have, though we have planets, we still have atoms, obviously. I mean, they consist of that. Even though we have molecules, we still have atoms, because they consist of that. And even though we have atoms, the very infrastructure that let them emerge from the quantum bubbling, whatever the fuck, that stuff is still there. I think there's basically no doubt about that. That's probably scientifically correct what I said. Probably even the terminology I used. Anyway, and why then should, if the universe was ever without the infinite extent of space that we have right now, that was of course always infinite from the moment that it first was spawned, because it cannot expand to infinity without having been infinite the whole time. The people who think that the original explosion or what it was one where a point expanded into infinity, that's ridiculous, man. That singularity originally cannot have been space-like. It must be concept-like. It must have been a truth. It must have been whatever it was. It was not space-like. But okay, anyway, beside of all that, let's just think for a second. If the universe ever was potentially not space-like, then couldn't this mean that this not space-like foundation from which everything emerged is just like atoms, and the forces that cause the atoms to come into existence and so forth, that all of that still also exists? That still something exists as part of the universe that has no space, where space doesn't exist. Let's assume that this is so. And, well, with this in mind, then if you measured one of these two atoms that we have in this overlapping undefined state, then the other one will also, then they will suddenly have a defined state. And if you separate these two atoms and then measure one of them, the other one will then also have a defined state, meaning that the universe is kind of communicating this event non-locally. It can carry that very far away, it still happens. And what's really baffling, and that is not disputed, it is factual science, is that this happens without delay. It doesn't happen at the speed of light. It happens in an instant. Look it up, it's true. Now, isn't the best possible explanation for that probably that it is just happening in a scenario where there is no space? I mean, if this non-space-like aspect of the universe still exists, then it's still active. And these events there that I just described might just be events that happen within that infrastructure. But the real thing here is, and that brings us back to the space flight of these women and judging and all of that. Yeah, it's funny how everything is somehow connected, isn't it? Well, let's say we still have indeed this non-space-like component, out of which then the infinite space emerged. What does this mean? It means that technically this non-space-like component or aspect or logic or whatever is omnipresent. And at the same time it's not, because if it's not space-like, the concept of location doesn't even exist. But there would be a transition between that and the space-like reality that we experience. And therefore it would be, on the one hand, it would be without space, but on the other hand it would reach into every part of space and would thus effectively be omnipresent. And doesn't this mean, I mean, if every part of the universe is logical, a logical mechanic somehow, whether there's some freedom in it or not, that's not the point. If everything is somehow a logical machinery, which I think we would say is probably the truth, isn't then that also the case for those aspects of the universe that are not space-like, the fundamental things from which the space emerged and which are possibly, in my opinion, probably still there? Yes. But doesn't this mean that the entire universe is unified non-locally as one infinite thing, basically in one place, with one logic, with one orchestration? Yes, that is what it would mean. I don't know what exactly that means, but that makes the idea of some kind of cosmic-wide orchestration meaningful. Now, you don't have to go so far as to look at it from a theistic perspective like I do, and then also assume that, well, everybody is the entire universe from their perspective, and then assume that ultimately we are the will that the universe is, because of course, I mean, God would have then formed himself to be the universe, and if we are God, then we are the will that the universe is, and so that would be the reason that the universe is. And we would be that, of course, only by our atoms, by ourselves, by the flesh that we are, but not consciously, yes? But that's the thing. Maybe that's also a configuration that we have when it comes to right and wrong. maybe the more we are the being that wants the universe to be, basically the love for reality, the unconditional appreciation of it, the one who wants to keep it in balance, the one who wants to basically submit his being to it, because that's certainly what it is. If God turns himself into this form, then he says, okay, I'm dedicating my potential of being anything I could be, of this I am orgasm, of all the potential, I'm dedicating that now to this eternal dream. That is submission. That is God submitting. And that is God changing his nature forever. That is basically God killing himself, and then, well, if God kills himself and dies, he goes to heaven. That is where that comes from, I guess, this idea. Not when, I think when we die, we're just dead. That's the end of story. But I think that eventually we won't die, because I believe that this ocean will become more and more flat, and then this infinity will return more and more. We will never get there, but eventually we will have basically enough money that we earn every month, that we can afford a nice apartment and some pizza every day and so forth. You know, I'm saying that eventually we will have achieved a cosmic flow level of luxury that will be high enough for us to even be able to grow arms back that were lost, to lift blindness, to be able to become young again, to become eternal. That is my belief. But, I mean, what does it have to do with this whole guilt thing? I mean, I'm saying that that this cosmic judge is you. If ever there will be someone who casts you into some kind of temporary hell, because I don't think it would be an eternal state, that would be you. You would be the one who looks into the cosmic mirror, because, I mean, certainly the universe is the will that we are. You might argue that the universe kills at every opportunity it can. I mean, like 10 to 27 degrees of a range to kind of feel comfortable isn't exactly cosmic scale, right? But what if the cosmic development kind of fell into some kind of focal point as soon as this level of consciousness, like animals had it, and now we have it, emerged? And so, well, there are no aliens. No, we're the cause and effect focus point of the cosmic evolution. Why would there be aliens then? Anyway, that's the explanation why we don't hear of any of them. It's my reasoning there. Anyway, so then, well, the universe certainly is the will that we are down here, because as soon as we destroy the environment too much, we will realize how much the universe indeed was the will that we are, because suddenly that will is gone, and so we can no longer be. Now you might say, well, how is our will that the universe is then relevant to the cosmos? It's not. But is it relevant to the environment here? Yeah, it is, definitely. And I think that the more we wake up, the more the waves settle, the more over the evolution of mankind, the more we will actually have power over the universe by our own perception. The more basically the fact that we are infrastructurally the will that the universe is, will become kind of a conscious thing. As in, the more your individual will, what you want to do, what you strive for, what you desire, will be a thing that the universe actually adheres to. I mean, maybe there's a meme of a Twitter account which is, I think, called the Tweet of God, which has some funny-looking old guy with a white beard face, and that tweet is actually one that I couldn't find again. But it is one that at some point I found and screenshotted, and that tweet says, hey, actually have it here, let's see, God tweet, there it is. So, everything, I find everything. I have 3 million files and folders on my machine, but if I want to find something and I've named it correctly, I find it instantly because I'm using the software Everything, which is free, and I can only recommend that I install it on every machine that I use. I keep talking about it. Google it, Everything. I mean, Google everything. So, and this tweet is saying, I care about each and every one of you so much that it cancels itself out, and it ends up looking like I don't give a shit. That's the tweet. And my position is, that is the actual situation that we are all in. With the slight difference that there's not one guy who says that, is our collective will. We have this infrastructure. Basically, before the universe, there would be the one guy who experiences existence and plays with it and does whatever the fuck he wants, because he is existence. Which is, by the way, also something I never hear talked about. Is God subjective or objective? He's both. Because when we are objective, so to speak, then we are looking at the entirety of the cosmos as deeply as we can and make our decisions based upon that. And when he makes a decision, he looks at all that exists, which is himself. And so, whether it's a whimsical thing, spur of the moment decision, or objective, it's the same thing in his case. And when I say his, I'm using human language, what I'm supposed to do. But okay, using the entire infrastructure of existence, which is all of existence, which is of course he himself, to play around, having fun. And that, I believe, is indeed the truth of existence. I believe that existence is holy. It has to exist. It cannot not exist. I mean, let's say that nothing would exist, not let alone the fact that we can't imagine a nothingness, because we would immediately go there and say, well, it's black and it's an extent, except it is without an extent, and so forth and so forth. That is a problem, but let's ignore that, because it's certainly a cheat to make the argument. No, not so much a cheat, and a good argument, therefore, is the following. If there would be nothing, then that would be a fact. That would be true. It would be the truth that nothing exists. But the truth itself would exist still, right? And I believe that's what God is, plain simply. He is the truth. Anyway, and so if he now turns that into this coexistence infrastructure by turning himself inside out, and then resulting in the coexistence of dreams, not as a design, but just as an artifact of his nature. Dreams wakes up. Now the everything at once version means an unnecessary what? The coexistence of dreams. It's not complicated. Uh-oh. The fuck, man? That was the Big Bang. No. Well, if that is the case, then necessarily the only way for there to be multiple minds is for each mind to be. I mean, we are all one mind then, if that concept is correct, right? And I believe it is correct. We are the one mind, and its name is love. It is the coexistence. But anyway, then everybody, let's say that basically God says, okay, here's my circle of self-perception. I will now separate that in two. Both halves will wish that the other half exists and can act freely, and between them there is a point of for undefinedness, which is not a sufficient way to implement what we have here, the universe. That would have to be in a different way, and I have some good concepts there, but that's not the point here. The point is that the only way for that original freedom to be shared by multiple is if the other is a consequence of the first. I mean, one says the other shall be, and the other shall be says the first shall be. It's a back and forth. Basically, it's a well, the only way to exist, basically, is if someone says that you shall, and that someone is the cosmos. But I believe that infrastructurally, that's what we all are. So basically, we're kind of one being with many heads, in a way. But hopefully with individual opinions. Otherwise, fuck off, please. Oh, I can buy some stuff. That's nice. So I'm saying, if we are all this many-headed plant, but consciousness, awareness, being able to play with fantasy, having will, altering reality and so forth, things that we can do, is something that God could originally do on a larger scale, admittedly, but in principle the same thing, in principle. This would mean that the more consciousness emerges within the universe, the more this consciousness first has to be the will that the universe is. And that's kind of what we're doing, right? We're growing up as babies, and we become successful, as in survivable and having fun, and indeed also financial success and all of that, by submitting to the world. We go through a portal of non-existence every time. We're submitting to the world. We don't know why. It has to be unconditional. We have to unconditionally give the existence that we are, the will that we are, the awareness that we are, the living fantasy that we are, the potential that we are, to the world. And whenever we have done that, then we have earned yet another small slice and another small layer of infrastructural justification. And so now we can then act within the system as a consciousness that has awoken. Because, well, I mean, first we have said yes to what is, and then we can within that space basically that we have then said shall exist, all of us, within that space we can then act. And anyone who wakes up to a higher and higher level there, they have more freedom. And hypothetically, the universe will also more strongly express itself in their personal regard in the way that that will have more fun. I don't know if that is actually true, okay? I have my very wild, very complex hypothesis here. It's a model that I actually believe in. But, I mean, I, for example, have heard many times that I look pretty young for my age. Also, I've been sitting on my ass basically for 40 years, more or less all the time. That's something that makes you ill, is what people generally say. I'm not ill. I don't have back pain. I mean, that occurs every once in a while, maybe once a year. It can also last maybe for a week or so. That can happen, yeah. But then I know, well, it will just self-perceive itself into shape again. I don't give a fuck. I don't go to the doctor. I just wait it out and then it's gone. And that, you know, it's not a frequent occurrence. It happens sometimes, you know. I'm just being, you know, full disclosure here. That's all. So, also, I mean, I go to the dentist basically every decade or so, and the last time I went, looked it up, and he said, okay, here we have a little bit, you know, basically there was nothing going on. How is it that I'm so fucking healthy? Maybe it's just a coincidence, may well be the case. Or I'm doing so much for it, which I can assure you I don't. I mean, sometimes I actually brush my teeth only once a day. I mean in the morning. So that would be an entire night of rot. And then 10 years later I go to the dentist and he says, well, there's nothing to be found here. What the fuck does that mean, man? It doesn't have to mean anything, but it would fit with the idea that there would be someone who has positioned themselves in regards to the karma space configuration that is possibly the truth of our existence very well. That the universe says, yeah, you shall be. Yeah, that's a friendly thing. That's fine. I mean, the more you look into the system, the more you first have to say it shall be. That's also, you know, you have to. The more you understand it, if you understand the universe, if you understand reality, like science, engineering and such, that is also that process. Because when you say, I accept that this is so, and I mean, the deeper you learn that, the more you actually then effectively the projector, the perceiver, the dreamer of this shape of existence. And it has to be this shape. If it isn't this shape, then the shape will tell you, dude, that's not right, and you better listen. Otherwise, I will destroy you. That's not actually the way it is being communicated, so many people will just fall into the cracks. But okay, if we are all the will that the universe is, because the universe is the will that we are, then of course, while we're still growing up as the collective gods that we are, and not yet having found the truth of the coexistence, we are all there's still a competition going on, and currently we can see in the world there are basically two large fronts of models who have interestingly accumulated all kinds of different views. For example, on the side that I'm not quite on, we have the Catholic Church basically holding the candle of Islam in Germany and basically helping the Islamization of the Occident, when its purpose should be, of course, to uphold Christianity and so forth and so forth. I myself am not religious, I'm just a theist. There's a difference there, I hope you understand that. Where was I? So we're still finding the right path, but I think we are very close to finding the final answer, that the ocean is almost flat. I mean, the level on which we are these days controlling the world, this kind of, we have geoengineering as a topic on the table. We have the problem of global warming, or at least we assume we do. I don't have a strong opinion on the matter, you know, either way. I mean, I think better safe than sorry, but okay, whatever. I'm saying that we have so much control over... Let's assume for a second, let's just do that the Earth is the focal point of cosmic evolution, because the importance of what was to be achieved energetically just has like fallen into this puddle that is Earth, which we then considered maybe Gaia, a living being, a spirit, blah blah blah, until the consciousness of human beings had emerged to a level high enough that now that is no longer relevant and is really just a stupid planet, and we are now the focus point. And so now, basically, the reason that there's so much shit going on in the world, that why would innocent people suffer and guilty people be rewarded? Could there even be an effect in the world where doing something particularly and intently evil and ugly, like, I don't know, sacrificing children or something, could that somehow be something that the universe would then, neutral as it is, consider as, well, that sounds like a plan, well, let's give some energy to that then, so that if someone that something like devil worship, of course metaphorical devil, is kind of possible, that you can attain energy and freedom and more power by doing such a thing, by just coming together. Because the thing is, as long as we, the coexistence gods, haven't yet decided with finality, globally manifested, accepted by everybody, and as the flow that is, then that good is the only thing that we want, and evil is something that we do not want, which we kind of decided, but not quite, right? Else it wouldn't exist. I mean, why do I need so many passwords? Two-factor authentication. The only thing I would need is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Because you would see there's a password on it, so I would accept that it's your will, that I don't look into it, and I will obey you. Because that's the way we should live in. That's the world we should live in. As long as that hasn't yet happened, all things are open. And if the universe is the unconditional will, that the consciousness is, which in this case is us, the coexistence consciousnesses are, then is also the unconditional will that, well, that even some evil shit can be. But why would doing something particularly evil then gain basically extra much energy? Why would that be a possible thing? Because well, as a collective brain, which we could consider ourselves to be, right? We're communicating. We're thinking collectively. We're thinking together. As a collective brain, we haven't yet, with absolute certainty, made the decision that evil is wrong. Else, it wouldn't happen. That's plain simply what it is. And if we would have made the decision, we'd be fine. But we have basically come together in this conviction of the concept. Well, we have the concept good and we have the concept evil, and these two are basically pretty much hard defined sets. These sets are pretty much complete. We know the content of these sets. We know these are two meanings that are complete, so to speak. We just haven't yet decided to only choose one of the two. In other words, the universe is now infusing, as long as we're shaping together the world that we want to live in, the universe is giving us, is saying unconditionally yes to that. It will keep saying that unconditionally. It's just the energy source. And that energy source is us. We have to say, this kind of a Möbius strip, It's, you take a sheet or take a strip of paper and you glue it together to a circle, except you twist it one time. So, are you the universe? Well, are you your fingernails and so forth? I mean, where does it end? There's kind of a transition between that hotspot in your head where the consciousness is seated and the rest of the world. And the thing is, it doesn't end at your skin. Just because you can move your body around, just because there's this invisible quantum world around you, doesn't mean that you're not somehow one with the cosmos. I already pointed out that possibly there's something like a non-locality there that is, well, necessarily everywhere, and that is probably orchestrating everything in a way that we don't understand. Orchestrating how? Well, if it has some logical concept behind it, like atoms and such generally have, and gravity has, and so forth, how it would operate, what would be the consequence of its actions, and so forth. If that is a thing, then yeah, that would be an orchestration of sorts. And it is everywhere in the cosmos at once. If something happens in this part of the cosmos, that means that something else will happen in that part of the cosmos. That is what I mean. That is how far that goes. I just don't know what its concept is. But my hypothesis is, it is basically just a logical consequence of us, of the God having made the decision, let's coexist. Let's be this, let's have this eternal party here. And let's ascend to the I am closer and closer until we have attained a level of real happiness. And then beyond that, greater and greater happiness, because we can never take this final leap and just get lost in the total orgasm of I am. We will ever get closer and will be our eternal presence. Will be just the eternal now. And will get better and better forever. That our fate is, metaphorically, because it's, I mean, what am I supposed to do with the feeble human words that I have, or the feeble human minds that I'm talking to, that we will basically live a mind and body orgasm for eternity that will get better by the day, better by the second, forever, limitlessly. That is, I believe, our actual unescapable fate, unless we fall into death, or unless, before it has happened. Anyway, and if that is what this is, if we are living in an infinite collective laser system that will just keep producing more and more light, then the way that the system would then decide what it shall do next would be based upon what is basically if I ponder the currently levitating decision, I mean I being the universe, not me, you know, I'm just saying, if the universe would think, hey, I'm the universe, what am I deciding here? Well, I have this quantum undecidedness here, from which I can orchestrate the entire cosmos simultaneously, and I will orchestrate that now in the following way. A meteorite shall strike Earth as an extinction level event, because the dinosaurs have taken over and there's no way that something meaningful can evolve anymore. So, well, I have to strike that down and that's, I think, what might have happened. It might also have been the explanation, I mean, it's not that there's a real explanation needed, why the Cuba crisis did not actually cause the nuclear war. Someone just, you know, the universe stepped in and said, nope, you won't. Somehow. Maybe. Who knows? And I believe that whenever we run into a situation where there is no more possibility, when nothing more can be done, when there's no force that can solve the situation, then that universe as a collective flow will step in. And, well, I mean, we are in a situation where we need that. I mean, maybe this whole thing that I'm talking about here, you think that I'm an idiot for believing such a thing. It's so ridiculous, even though it may be interesting for a science fiction story, but listen up. That is probably the situation that we're in. Because, I mean, let's say we want to adhere to the golden rule as well as we can, right? We want to be good beings. And the more intelligent we become, the more skeptical we have to be. As in, the more we know that we don't actually know shit. The more we know that our decisions are possibly harmful without the justification of doing whatever the fuck we're doing. The more we know that if we are judging someone else for... I mean, if someone says, well, you cannot say that thing because I feel negatively about it, and we think that's ridiculous, that's a violation of free speech on a level that's completely unacceptable, is my position. However, what if I'm wrong? And what if we, as a collective, for example, come to the conclusion that we cannot know whether it's wrong, and so we are better safe than sorry, and we just prohibit that speech, which would be wrong. But I know, what if we land there? And also, what if we regard each other's freedom so much in the way that we need to? I mean, for the perfect society to live in, we have to basically drive, live and let live to a level that we're basically submitting to each other unconditionally. Basically that we're treating each other's, which is what I have been doing for years until I had attained a normal level of coexistence once again, as God, as the supreme God. And that's how I saw my fellow beings, my fellow people. I still do, but it doesn't matter these days because, well, it has just normalized. Maybe I am just there already while you are still seeking. Who knows? Anyway, what I'm saying is maybe this collective strive towards coexistence will eventually, indeed, whether we use that word then or not, have to revere each other on a level that will be almost like we're kneeling before each other. Only since it's balanced, it's fine. I mean, let's say we have the beginning of mankind, and basically nothing has been established yet coexistence-wise, and from that we step immediately into the current reality that we have right now. We're trying to design it. You know, we have that level of self-understanding and freedom and so forth. Would we be able to regulate that? That would be completely extreme. That would be the ocean suddenly having waves up to the sky, and we would all drown in it. It wouldn't work. Basically, mankind has to wake up to refining this collective circle of the perfect coexistence that we're striving towards in emergence steps, step by step. The more we get there, the more we will see how far we are not there yet. And that's why now we have begun to try to implement some kind of global regulations of behavior based upon omnipresent emotion, basically. That's one of the ways to look at it. And that's the thing. If we are now beginning to submit to each other unconditionally, then we will live in an age of demons and angels. We will live in an age where the universe will unconditionally say yes to both. There will be two halves. One of them will be the ones who submit to the truth, to skepticism, to what they believe is right. And the other ones, they will just see, oh, there's a power vacuum, thank you! You know, the original sin. Basically, the ones that will say, I submit to the world, however hard it may be. And the others, they say, I want, someone applauding Trump, for example, to be shot dead. That is wrong. No matter what you think about Trump. those who think that this assassination attempt should have actually been successful, they are on the wrong side of this equation. Because that is just saying, okay, there in that moment there was suddenly that power to change reality on that vast scale. And even though in every other regard of life we would consider that to be a wrong act, then suddenly we regard it as right? Motherfucker, that is exactly the original sin. Or original sin. Why would I call that original sin? Because, well, originally that was God who could design existence in any way he wanted to. Now we have to submit to reality to do that properly. And if sometimes there are situations where you can just, for example, lie to someone else to kind of wrap a reality around their mind, to the matrix, blinding them from the truth, so that you suddenly have a manifested situation that you like, and the other person then lives in a diminished reality because you lied to them. That is also that very power abuse. That is dreaming reality for yourself instead of dreaming it for each other. Basically submitting to each other so you can submitting to the world, and well, we are part of the world and thus also submitting to each other. That's the thing, we have always submitted to the universe from birth. The more we were waking up, the more we were growing up, the more we submitted. First, I want to not be outside the body on this dry towel, then I don't want to have to go to school, then I don't want to have to go to work, and so forth. But we submitted to that. But we also have to submit to each other. And the thing is, we have to submit to each other truthfully, not just as a necessity that is forced upon us, but we have to have the will. Because you know what? It is ugly. It is fucking ugly. And you know that, and you feel that when you think about it. To just pretend. You have to be the truth that you pretend to be living. Otherwise, what kind of life is that? And we are becoming more and more sensitive to our emotions and to each other's emotions as we are getting closer and closer to implementing coexistence properly. That is our trajectory, man. We are on the path of ultimately living the most refined, perfect emotion collectively. And what is that but the spirits in a coexistence? What is that but God in a coexistence? That is what our trajectory is. And see, the universe will have to step in to sort it out, because we will be angels who submit to the demons. Because can we be sure that fighting them off with violence, which will be the only last resort, that will be the only way to win ultimately, is that do we have the right to do that? It is so far removed from what we would otherwise do, so that we can't, and they will use that. They will use that violence. They will be the hypothetical boot that stomps onto the human face for eternity. And the universe will have to step in, else we are lost. Because the mind can only submit to reality, but the people and what they do are part of reality, and some of them abuse it, obviously. And so there will be an age of demons and angels, and that's the age we are already in. When the European Commission, the EU Commission, some of the decisions they make are probably good, but are ultimately abusing their power knowingly, but also because they're just getting lost in fantasy. They have so much defining power over reality that they can no longer see what the objective reality is. Is tricky anyway to know that in this world where so much is based upon subjective perception, or maybe on decisions that are intentionally deceptive or whatever. But yeah. So see, I believe that when we go back to this trip, this spaceship trip, the decision whether this trip was right or wrong, or the decision whether you should pay for your dog food or should give that money to charity, whether you should, whatever Superman should do at any point in time, that is like the most complex question to ever answer. And therefore judgment is the trickiest thing ever, because what if this karma space concept that I allude to, that I try to make you actually believe, is true? What if that is true? That means that people who are basically closer to the mirror of reality, because it's a mirror, what does it mirror? It mirrors the light. What is the light? The light is love. The light is the will to give existence. And the more refined this whole thing is, the less giving will feel like it is a loss. The more we have actually become as persons, that which we already are as beings down to the infrastructure of reality. The more we have become that as persons, the more giving and taking will have become the same thing. And I think sex is actually the best metaphor that we have on kissing and such, because in that moment we're experiencing something that we take, but we are also giving, because that is a shared experience, that's shared bliss. And but in other parts of life that is not so. But you know, if for example two people are playing together in a game that they both like, that is giving them giving the other the pleasure of not doing that alone, of doing that together, which is usually good, and also having that pleasure yourself. And so the more the world will have evolved, the more giving and taking will have become the same thing. And so the closer someone is to this mirror of love, where you can see ultimately your own face in the blackness of the cosmos, metaphorically, where the reality that you experience will just be the reality that you personally like, because ultimately we will fall into an orchestration that will not be on cosmic scales, or one currently on societal scales, where it's not yet clear that evil is wrong, which I think it is, but it is still happening on a grand scale. So from the universe's perspective, it's not yet clear. So both of these wills, which are both very strongly in line with the universe, I mean, let's say, for example, there could someone arguing with an atheist saying, "Hey, I don't have the position. I'm just using it as an example, okay?" When someone could argue with an atheist, "Hey, you don't actually have an objective right and wrong. So why are you not raping and pillaging, for example?" Which is, of course, a ridiculous argument, but in principle, that argument has been made often, and so you can see how there's a meaningful parallel here. We have evil in the world, and why should these people not do that evil? If it makes them happy, if it gives them money, if there's no police that can detect what they're doing, or if the police are even in on it or are powerless to stop it, why should these people not do it? There is no reason. There is no reason that they can see in reality. Of course, you know, from an emotional perspective, there is a reason. Because it should make you feel shitty, motherfucker. And if it doesn't, then your emotional apparatus is so sick, then I wonder how you're even functional. But that's the thing. We can climb to that level and still be functional. And this means that we're so close to the mirror of the universe that the universal mirror will say, okay, they will be done. And this means that potentially something like, I don't know, child sacrifices, which is kind of, you know, conspiracy theory that some people have. And I don't have it, but I think that maybe it's a thing. Maybe it's actually a thing. Maybe devil worshipping is actually a meaningful pursuit. But I think that since the universe will eventually be the space that we will all live in properly, eventually the universe itself will step in and say, okay, I think the decision has been made. This is the wrong path. So, but since these people can go to the very top of reality, they are enforcing it. No one can stop them. This means that the universe will also have to step in on the top, you know? And this means that I think that at some point, everything will basically happen at once. We will have a sudden realization, a global cosmic almost realization that what I'm pleading here that you should think is maybe the truth, is the actual truth. That we will realize we are in a divine reality here, that this is eternity, that this is the actual holy heaven of the Lord, and the Lord is you. And that you're not living up to this. What will you do then to yourself? You don't even have to become aware of it consciously. I mean, if eventually this space will be organized in the perfect way for everybody, that it will be the perfect orchestra where everybody have their personal, like, let's say you want to fuck. And someone else also happens to want to fuck. The universe will orchestrate it so that you happen to meet the other person in the right time in the right place. That's what I mean by orchestration. You will not become unfree, it will just become a more meaningful orchestration than it already is, because it is an orchestra that we as humans are trying to orchestrate, of course, because we don't see anything else that will orchestrate it. But there will have to be something, because the time of demons and angels has begun. How we will ever get out of this? How will we topple the power structures at the top of our human reality that the universe is saying, yeah, well, you can do that. I mean, you don't even have to believe in this karma space concept. It is still the case that these people are utilizing the universe, reality, for their purposes. And so at least effectively, the cosmos is saying, yeah, what you're doing there, the exact way you're doing it, it works. I mean, the more evil basically, let's say someone does something evil. Now they have to do another evil thing. They have to hide it. They have to lie. Maybe they have to kill someone to keep it a secret. Maybe they have to bribe the police to keep it a secret. Oh, Shazam, we have more evil in the world. See, evil is infectious. Evil begets more evil. And this means that the more evil it is, maybe this means the better it can be. I mean, you know, maybe good and evil, like maybe this very significant film, the episode 4 of Star Wars, the first film that was made in that of that series, where the idea of the what's the fucking name? The dark side of the Force, maybe that's the kind of the reality that we live in. Except you cannot conjure reality with your will directly, like the Force wielders can in that film. But instead, you can make the karma space that we live in, I believe, can make that your servant. By either being as good as you can be and as sane as you can be, something that I try, or by trying to be as evil as you can be. Because, I mean, the realization, basically we have tried to find out how shall we coexist properly. That was always the pursuit that we had, always. That is true, no matter if my weird concepts here are true. And that means that ultimately the concept of good and the concept of evil, which are not just concepts but sets even, we have a long list of things that are good and a long list of things that are evil, that these things are ultimately the answer. And then the answer ultimately is of course to abandon one of the two. And that means that these have the utmost power when it comes to orchestrating the flow of our collective reality, if that is even the truth. This orchestration. And that means that something like the dark side of the Force might be true. That something like devil worship might be true. And that something like hell might be true. Because once reality would then reveal itself, that all the religions which are currently then, at least according to my beliefs, are basically death cults, because they have no reason to believe what they're believing. There's no hard reason in reality, other than, of course, the place that you were born in, and of course the collective force that the religion has attained by now. There's no objective reason to believe that crap, man. I mean, if you would do away with all of science, we would find science again. If you would do away with all of religion, we would also find religion again, but that religion would be different. Definitely. So, and since that is just willful, but at the same time very forceful, and very much incompatible with my view here, but my view is the truth is what I believe, then this means that the eventual immortality that we're all attaining is being delayed artificially by the will of these billions of people who want to keep believing what they're doing. And, well, the universe obeys. It will not reveal that we're living in this divine cosmos. It will not reveal that, because that would prevent people from tossing their cigarette butts on the holy grounds, that would prevent people from letting their dog shit everywhere, that would prevent people from, I don't know, raping someone, that would prevent people from being evil in general, that would prevent people from being religious because they would know the truth of God. They would know God, that's us, motherfucker. And so they would know that you don't have to die to go to heaven. We now have immortality. This is heaven. You know, all of that would change, and that is all incompatible. And so if my overall model is true, then, well, religions are basically killing people left and right the whole time just by persisting, even if they don't actually kill someone. That is my view of them. Now, this view is a bit extreme, but I'm not doing anything about it. There's always, I have possibly more than anyone else on the planet, a separation between my inner being and what I actually do in the outer world. I mean, this is what I'm doing here, these videos where I talk about that is as close as it gets to me acting upon it, you know? So, no, there's no danger from me, don't worry. I mean, I want to be close to the mirror, right? And what does this mean? It means that I must be close to the truth. And what does that mean? Well, the closest to the truth you are, the more you know about it, while at the same time upholding the question mark, saying, I don't know it yet, I don't know, as on a higher level. So the question mark must become louder and more powerful and more profound the closer you get. And I'm trying to, well, the closer to the mirror you get, the more skeptical you have to be. So you have to forgive those who saying, well, climate change, I'm not sure if that is actually a problem. Maybe it is. I'm personally saying better safe than sorry, but I don't know. You have to forgive us, because maybe we truly don't know. Maybe we have pursued the information available. You might say, well, it's definitely, there's a scientific fact. The science has said it. The science, like in COVID, motherfucker? Do we really live in a world right now that is unbiased enough that we can lean into something like science like that, when it is potentially so politicized? I mean, there's a lot of politics in there, you know? All the money that flows into the changes, but also the money that flows into persisting the old ways, like oil and such. I mean, it's tricky. I know that I don't know. That's my situation. Sorry. So, back to the spaceflight thing then. Or maybe first to this hell thing? Because, you know, if we are using the universe on the highest levels for good, but also on the highest level for bad, wouldn't this mean that eventually, once it is suddenly revealed that we are living in this cosmos, because just all avenues of not seeing it, which is kind of what mankind is trying to do. Mankind is trying to not see it. Maybe that's even why the views of these videos are so low. Oh, maybe that's actually the case. But anyway, mankind is really trying to not see it, I think. And maybe eventually all avenues of that will have been fulfilled, but God has no choice but to wake up from the dream, and that's even true in the coexistence configuration. So eventually that consciousness, that awareness will have no choice but to have understood what we live in, the world that we live in. And maybe, and that's what I believe, I'm just, you know, an early adopter, you know. And eventually that will be revealed, and that will be rather a sudden event, because there are so many reasons for it not to happen. 4 billion at least, you know, all the religious people, for example. I mean, there are more than 4 billion even. And then, all of a sudden, when we realize that we're in that reality, then miracles can begin to happen. When I say miracle, I just mean that the quantum uncertainty can here and there reach to the level of everyday level manifestation orchestrated by this karma space concept, meaning there's something like arms can grow back and the eye can just morph back into existence and so forth, just how you feel you want to be. Or like the orchestra of us feels how a human should be able to feel. That is how it will happen, is my conviction. And when that happens, when that transformation of body, when that miracle time has begun, what do you think happens to the devil worshippers? They will melt. They will melt in place. On the cosmic infrastructural levels, they will become pure hell dwellers. They will become pure living pain. They will become the absolute perfect possible suffering on levels that have so far not been imagined, that you cannot imagine even now as I describe it conceptually. Just beyond, and like a brazen bull, the brazen bull, where you're being, you know, I will not describe it in detail, but all the torture methods that mankind has come up with, where all of that will be something that you will long for, because it will be less of a suffering. That is, I believe, what will happen to those people. We will actually, all these zombie games, they are not just fun, not just, you know, a kind of a logical consequence, because we want to play interesting games. Interesting games are, for example, games where you are interacting with agents. The simplest way to interact with agents is, well, to kill them in a game at least, you know, because that's a simple thing to implement. I mean, every 3D game, every 3D engine has a raycast concept where you can measure, is the point of space from which I'm looking here towards that other point, is that crossing another plane? And in this way, basically the first game that ever comes into existence automatically when you ever come to grips with using such a 3D engine is what? A shooter. That's why there are so many of these, and why it's so simple to make one. I'm not saying that these games are very simple on the level that we actually purchase them on Steam and so forth, but in principle it's so simple to make. But anyway, it's then we have these slaughtering someone. That's also something you cannot do in everyday life. Okay, that's another thing to talk about. Why would you do that then? Are you indeed a violent person who wants evil? That's such a ridiculous argument. I am a mind. I am a Holy Spirit, like all of you also are. Everybody is. And I want to experience myself. I want to trip, man. We have this objective reality that we are grounded in, but we're also watching films. I mean, when you're watching, like say, a romantic film, where someone ultimately maybe loses someone, or there's some sadness and so forth, does this mean you want that in reality, huh? If you want a horror film, does this mean you want that in reality, huh? So when you play a shooter, does that mean you want to shoot people in reality? That's just ridiculous, man. We're just, you know, free spirits who want to dream, we want to self-experience. That's all that fucking is, man. Anyway, and so it's kind of natural that something like a zombie game comes up, but I think that's actually not all it is. I believe it is also a precursor, kind of an announcement, an anti-temporal artifact, something that emerged from this orchestration system that we are all embedded in, all connected to, something that we can kind of sense already without being aware of it, that feeds then back to the mirror surface, that manifests that as a consequence, that eventually we will have a zombie age. There will be people who will just be living torture, walking like pure pain, the whole time just pain. Pain in mind, pain in body, pain on the molecular level, pure torture on the spiritual level, hell, actual fucking holy fucking hell. But, you know, temporarily limited. Can I move this now? Oh yeah. Well, and this means that ultimately it's best if everybody will be their own judge. Do you think that your money would be better served if you give it to, instead of your dog or to your cat or whatever, give it to charity? Maybe a part of you thinks that. But that, you must realize, is possibly just a spike. Is it in balance with your overall self-flow? Is that really the decision you would now make because you want to be innocent? You should levitate yourself slowly and in a balanced fashion towards perfection, towards innocence, instead of, you know, jumping to a certain place, certainly. I mean, for example, someone saying, okay, I have this money, and there are some films like that where some dispute over the MacGuffin, the thing that everybody strives after, but the MacGuffin is actually not revealed, or maybe it is, and it's potential. Maybe it is some money. And then in the end, the good guys have won, and then they have all this money. And then they decide, you know what, let's just give that to charity. And then they walk over to some nuns and hand it to them. But is that fucking charity? Is that the right thing to do? Is giving the money to charity the right thing to do? Do you know that the charity you're giving all your money to, is that really right? Are you not giving it to the wrong people and so forth? Yeah. So I think judging other people is tricky, and the best thing we should do is not do that. And we're doing that all the time. For example, when I started with these podcast thingies, and maybe some of you still do, you might think, what the fuck is that? I mean, but see, okay, I think I already said at the beginning of the video, which was also not supposed to be the topic, is if there's words that you like to hear, then you are friendly to them. But if there are words that would move you, like some of these words have the potential to, then that is annoying. And that's one of the reasons why we live in this world where, when the people realize this whole COVID thing, we're not dealing with that correctly, and why we live in the world when we were saying unbounded migration, that's not the right answer, but you know, that was just unpleasant to hear because the forces that be had decided for that, and now we are living with the fires that have started with that. We know it was wrong because the reality has calculated for us the thing that we tried to prevent by thinking for ourselves. So I mean, whenever basically that's actually what I think is the phenomenon of Trump. I don't know how much of an idiot Trump is or how right he is. I will not speak to that. But I know one thing. What he decided right from the start, the first things he was doing, were very much flying in the face of the things that were, of accepted norms, the way he was dealing with it. I mean, when, for example, Trump and his wife, Melania, walk next to each other, and he is then reaching for her hand, and she is slapping that away, that is immediately a news article and some scandal and so forth in the minds of the carpet dwellers, of the lowest humans that exist in the world, of the lowest, smallest minds that have a distance to the mirror that makes them ridiculously irrelevant. I'm not saying they don't deserve to live. I said that. I cannot calculate the score, and I said that when the score is at least 0, that should be sufficient. But I'm saying what really happened there maybe is that there were two adults who are emotionally adult and don't give a fuck what other people think about them. Or have you not really understood that by now? They don't care. They have grown so big emotionally in a sane way. It doesn't mean that the decision overall is sane. That's not what I'm saying. That they don't care. And then when she was slapping that away, there was just, yeah, don't do that now, man. Maybe there was just some private discussion in a way that they were having, or some interaction in the previous days or previous hours or minutes that was just continued in that moment, and that they didn't care it was in public. And so also this slapping away was also just, the way it would have happened. It's just, that's what I'm saying. See, maybe that is true, or maybe it's not true. Maybe he is an idiot, or maybe he's not. But one thing you certainly have to agree with is that the things that he did, and the way he did it, and the way he expresses himself are certainly controversial. And this means that certainly the following concept applies. The likelihood that someone looks at that and says, that's wrong, I don't like it, I don't like the person, is higher, regardless of whether it's right. And that, I believe, is what might have happened in the case of Trump. That the whole world just came to a decision. And since it was such a collective lopsidedness that the world now has in any way, that is then something that's stuck. And can you turn around now? No, that would look stupid. And all people are still saying that, so you don't want to be, you know, shunned. You don't want to be the odd man out and so forth, which I'm hereby risking to be. But I mean, you see that I'm talking concepts. I'm trying to wake you up, fellow God, because I mean, I want to go to heaven already. You know, I'm trying to wake you up. I'm trying to make you the best possible coexistence participant. Even if my whole model is wrong, that is still a good thing to do for me and a good thing for you to strive for. Yeah, and I think, well, this thing now has run out of steam, and so I end it. Until next time.